In the village of Mbale, where the river curved like a sleeping serpent and the baobabs stood older than stories, two sisters were born under the same moon but not the same light. Nima, first by a breath, came with the sunrise, eyes soft, smile steady. Salima, moments later, arrived as the storm clouds gathered. She cried louder, flailed harder, and even as a baby seemed unwilling to accept second place. They grew together but not together. Where Nima moved like water, gentle and sure, Salima burned, impulsive, clever, always looking over her shoulder as if trying to catch up to something just out of reach. Villagers whispered of the twins as a pair made by balance. One to heal, one to test. By 16, Nima had become everything the village praised. She tended to goats and elders with equal patience. Her laughter was soft and rare, like honey from an old comb. When the healer's son Musa began lingering by the herb shed, no one was surprised. Their match was not just accepted, it was expected. He brought her bundles of dried mint and bits of carved bone. She returned his gifts with long silences and lowered eyes, which in village language meant yes. Salima, on the other hand, had taken to the hills, to the edge of the market, to the shadows beneath the mango trees. She wore her hair wild, cut her skirts short for running, and learned the names of dangerous herbs no one taught her. She laughed loudly, danced without invitation, and had once kissed a traveling boy just to see what it would feel like. "You try too hard," Nima once said gently. "Let life come to you." Salima spat on the ground and muttered, "It always comes to you first." The tension between them lived like a third sister, unseen but always present. Their mother, before she passed, had warned them, "Mirrors are doors, not walls. Twins must never look into one together." The girls never understood it, not until later. That warning returned to Nima one night as she passed the storeroom on her way to fetch water. The door was cracked. Candlelight flickered inside. She heard a voice, her voice, but it was not hers. It was sharper, mocking, like someone playing her as a role. She stepped forward, silent as a cat, and pushed the door just enough to see. Salima stood before the tall mirror, their mother's old wedding dress draped over her shoulders. It fit her poorly, the sleeves too long, the waist too tight, but she swayed in it, arms raised like a bride awaiting applause. "I'm Nima," she cooed, watching herself with a sly smile. "I'm so quiet and perfect. I fetch water and feed the goats. I say yes without saying anything." Her voice shifted slightly as she continued. "Oh Musa," she whispered in Nima's tone. "I love your bones and herbs and shy eyes. I'll be the perfect wife just like you dreamed." Then laughter. But it wasn't Salima's usual bark. It was layered, hollow, almost distant, as if it echoed from somewhere deeper than the room. Nima's heart pounded. She pushed the door open fully and Salima froze, caught between mimicry and madness. The mirror caught them both now, two faces so alike and yet not at all. Nima's eyes filled with hurt, Salima's with challenge. "What are you doing?" Nima asked quietly. Salima did not answer. Her shoulders rose, defiant. "Take it off," Nima said more sternly. "That's not for you." "Why not?" Salima hissed. "Because he picked you? Because you were first? You don't even know what you want. You just follow. You get everything and act like you asked for nothing." Nima stepped forward. "That dress is our mother's. And she's gone. Like everything else I've ever had." The candle beside the mirror sputtered, and for a moment, their reflections flickered. Something shifted. Salima's image in the glass did not move when she did. It stared back, lips closed, smiling. Nima noticed. "Salima," she whispered, staring into the mirror, "look at it." Her sister followed her gaze. And saw it too. Her reflection was wrong. Its smile lingered too long. Its fingers curled at its side when hers did not. The air grew colder. The flame shrank. Salima's bravado cracked. She dropped the hem of the dress and stepped back, whispering, "It's just a mirror." "No," Nima said, grabbing her arm. "It's not." Their mother's warning rose again in her mind. Mirrors are doors, not walls. Twins must never look into one together. The glass darkened slightly, like smoke behind it. The figures within flickered, then matched them again, but slower, delayed, as if remembering how to be them. Nima yanked the cloth off Salima's shoulders and pulled her out of the room. They slammed the door and the mirror rattled. Neither spoke for a long time. Outside the wind picked up. Dogs barked. Somewhere, the goats knocked their horns against the pen restlessly. Finally, Salima whispered, "It wasn't just me, was it?" Nima shook her head. Salima sat on the ground, her voice thinner than ever. "Sometimes, I hate you. Not because of you. Just because I look at you and wonder why I wasn't born easier, lighter. Chosen. I never asked to be chosen, Nima said. I know, Salima muttered. The next morning the mirror was gone. Only the candle remained, melted completely. Their father said nothing when they told him. He only nodded once and murmured, "Your mother told me it would happen one day." That night, Nima slept near the window watching the moon. Salima slept with the candle stub under her pillow. And neither of them looked in a mirror for many, many days. But sometimes, when they passed the pond near the edge of the village, Nima caught glimpses in the water, her reflection smiling too long, lips not quite moving with her own. And once, Salima whispered without looking down, "Don't look at it too long. It remembers us." From that day forward, nothing in the house with a reflection was left uncovered. And whenever one of them walked by a mirror, the other always waited until she was gone. The air between them never fully softened again. But a new silence grew, one of caution, of respect, of something older than rivalry. Something waiting still behind the glass. It started with silence. After the mirror incident, the house grew tense with unspoken things. Salima avoided Nima's eyes. Nima, for her part, tried to act as if nothing had happened. But the air between them buzzed with something new, something sharp. Their father watched them more carefully now, though he said nothing, only adjusted the wards he had nailed into the door frames and burned herbs that left thick, bitter smoke in the rafters. Still, the days moved forward, dragging the girls with them. The healer's son, Musa, continued to visit. He smiled at Nima with a gentleness that made the goats calm and the wind settle around them. But he noticed the way Salima hovered, silent behind doorways, watching. There was one place no one went anymore, the storeroom with the mirror. Their father had boarded it shut. "Some reflections aren't yours to claim," he muttered when Nima asked why. But the memory of that night clung to both sisters like smoke. Then came the 7th moon, an auspicious one, the elders said. The time of the river's blessing. It was tradition. Girls of age would go to the high cliff by the bend of the river to wash their feet and bless their futures. It was said the river spirits would whisper to those whose hearts were pure. It was Salima who suggested it. She spoke sweetly like honey stirred into porridge. "Let's go, just us. One last ritual before your wedding. I'll help you prepare." Nima hesitated. But Salima looked so calm. So soft in the morning light. And for a moment, Nima wanted to believe her sister had turned a page. So they went. Before sunrise they left the house barefoot, cloaked in light shawls, their anklets jingling softly. The path to the cliff wound past wild banana trees and tall grass, dew clinging to their feet. Salima walked behind Nima the entire way. At the cliff's edge, the river below was black with night, silver-threaded by moonlight. It murmured softly like a sleeping creature. Nima stepped forward, closing her eyes to whisper her prayer. She never saw it coming. A single push. 2 hands, firm and fast, slammed between her shoulder blades. Her breath caught in her throat as the world tipped forward. The cliff vanished beneath her. The sky rushed past. And the river swallowed her whole. Salima stood at the edge, chest rising fast, lips parted. Her hands trembled, then stilled. The black water rippled once, twice, and then calmed. No body rose. No hand broke the surface. The river accepted its offering. She stood there for a long time, waiting, half hoping something would crawl back up. Nothing did. The wind picked up. A bird screamed in the trees behind her. When she returned to the village just before sunrise, barefoot and alone, she cried. She wailed. She threw herself to the ground outside their house and said Nima had slipped. That the river had taken her in a moment of silence. That she had tried to reach her, tried. But it was too late. The village believed her. Because why wouldn't they? Twins were strange, yes, but Salima had always lived in Nima's shadow. If she cried loudly enough, it was not unnatural, it was expected. Tragedy pulled people together, and they wrapped their arms around her and fed her sweet plantains and said, "You were lucky to have had her. The spirits take the brightest ones early." Their father said little. He carved a small wooden figure with Nima's name and buried it beside their mother's grave. He sat at the fire most nights, staring into the flames. Salima wept in front of others. And then, slowly, she began to wear Nima's clothes. It started with the soft green wrapper, the one Musa had complimented. Then the amber earrings. Then Nima's sandals. Each day another piece. No one said anything. Until one day she wore Nima's beaded necklace, the one Musa had carved for her from riverbone. That day she stood in the center of the marketplace, head bowed just enough to seem grieving, and someone said, "She looks just like Nima." Salima smiled, only for a second. She began speaking softer, moving slower. She practiced Nima's posture, the way she tilted her head when thinking. She laughed less, listened more. The other girls started calling her gentle Salima. Musa was quiet for weeks. He did not come to the house. Then one afternoon he walked by and saw her in the garden, dressed in Nima's old yellow shawl. She smiled at him and did not blink. He hesitated. His eyes flickered with something, confusion perhaps, but then he nodded once and left. That night, Salima stood in front of the mirror in their father's bedroom. This one was smaller, unboarded, unburned. She wore Nima's shawl and necklace, her face clean of kohl, hair braided like Nima once wore it. "I am Nima," she whispered, watching her reflection. The mirror did not crack. It did not ripple. But for a moment, it did not return her breath. Her chest rose. The girl in the glass did not move. Then, slowly it smiled. Just slightly. Not wide enough to be obvious. Salima stepped back. The candle flickered. She turned and left the room. By the next week, Musa had begun to visit again. He brought bundles of herbs and spoke more to her than before. He never said Nima's name. Neither did Salima. The village quietly approved. What else should the boy do, they said. Life must go on. But the goats grew restless. Their father began coughing. And the river, though full and calm, seemed to whisper at night. Salima ignored it all. She had taken her sister's steps and made them her own. But deep beneath the still black surface of the river, something was watching. Something that had been pushed. And something that had not drowned. By the time 2 moons had passed, the lie had grown roots. Salima woke each morning as Nima. She walked with measured grace, kept her head slightly bowed, and spoke in the softened cadence her sister had always used. Her laughter was no longer a bark but a hum behind her teeth. When villagers greeted her with a hesitant smile, saying, "It's good to see you walking again," she'd lower her gaze and murmur, "One step at a time." She had memorized everything. The tilt of Nima's chin. The rhythm in which she fed the chickens. The way her fingers brushed over Musa's wrist when passing him herbs. Even her silence. That quiet strength Nima had always carried like a shawl. Never loud, never proud, just present. Salima wrapped it around herself with care. And no one noticed. No one questioned. Not even Musa. He had been hesitant at first. When he looked at her, there was always a pause. As if a word caught behind his lips. But when she smiled the way Nima used to, slight and sad, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough, he seemed to relax. As if he wanted to believe. Needed to. One evening, as the sun dipped into the hills, Musa sat beside her on the woven mat outside their home. He offered her a carved bead, river-polished and threaded with a strand of hair. "I was going to give this to you before the river," he said. Salima reached out slowly, her fingers trembling just enough to seem overcome. "I remember," she whispered even though she didn't. He smiled. And for the first time touched her hand. That night the lie felt warm. Like a second skin. Like maybe it had always been hers to wear. But the river did not forget. While the village slept, it stirred. Small at first, ripples where no wind blew. Bubbles clustering on the surface, then bursting with quiet pops. Frogs stopped croaking. Crickets fell silent. When Salima passed the river's bend the next morning, the air turned cold. Birds lifted in unison and fled. A goat tied near the reeds thrashed until its ropes snapped. It bolted back toward the village without a sound. She walked faster, clutching her shawl. But the silence followed. At night she began to dream. Not of water or cliffs, but of mirrors. In her dreams, every reflection was wrong. When she looked into the cooking pot, her face stared back too long. When she peered into the basin to wash her hands, the water rippled only on her side. Once, she dreamed she was brushing her hair and saw a second pair of hands behind her, doing the same. She awoke sweating, her braid half undone. She stopped brushing her hair at night. Her father, still quiet since the accident, watched her from the corner of the room sometimes. He did not speak. His eyes followed her with the patience of a man who had learned not to trust his own thoughts. Once, as she passed him with a gourd of water, he said, "You're walking like her now." Salima froze. He continued, voice hoarse. "You used to stomp. Now you glide." She said nothing. He turned back to the fire. The animals grew stranger. The chickens refused to enter the coop when she stood nearby. The neighbor's dog snarled if she approached. The healer's cat, a fat gray thing that had once curled in Nima's lap, arched and spat the moment she entered the healer's hut. "I'm not who you remember," Salima whispered, bending low. The cat hissed. Still the villagers believed. They believed when she laid flowers at the riverbank. They believed when she sang Nima's favorite song to the children. They believed when Musa took her hand again and smiled like a man finding light after dark. They needed to believe. Because the other option, that a sister had pushed another into the black water and returned wearing her bones, was too heavy to bear. The lie in its fullness was easier, more beautiful, less bloody. Salima wore it well. Until the mirror cracked. It happened in the 3rd week of the 3rd moon. She was adjusting her shawl in front of the small glass shard nailed above the doorway, meant for protection to watch the spirits. It had been her mother's. She caught her reflection smiling. She wasn't. She stepped back. The smile vanished. She leaned forward. Slowly. Her breath fogged the glass. Her eyes met their twins. They blinked a beat too late. She ran from the house, heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The next morning the mirror was gone. The shard lay shattered beneath the threshold. She swept it up before her father could see. But something in her face had changed. She noticed it when a child pointed and said, "Nima's eyes look darker now." Or when an elder tilted his head and asked, "Have you always had that mole?" The details were slipping. Not from her performance, but from the body itself. Her own skin was forgetting her. That evening as she fetched water from the well, her fingers trembled on the rope. She peered into the dark basin and saw the sky. Then 2 faces. Hers. And Nima's. The second face blinked. She screamed. The water stayed still. No one believed her. That night, Musa came to her house with a smile and a bone-carved ring. He knelt before her, gentle and warm. "My heart has known you in grief," he said. "Let me know it in joy." Salima stared at the ring. Her mouth opened. The air behind her chilled. A whisper slithered past her ear. Soft. Familiar. "I remember." She gasped. Dropped the ring. Musa looked up, startled. "What is it?" She smiled weakly, hands shaking. "Nothing," she whispered. "Just the wind." But even as she reached for the ring again, her reflection in the window showed her something else entirely. Nima. Standing just behind her. Not smiling. Just watching. And remembering. The first whisper came just before dawn. Salima sat upright in bed, her breath caught mid-dream. The house was still, save for the slow creak of the wind pushing against the shutters. She listened closely, thinking it might be her father talking in his sleep again, but the sound was different this time. Softer. What? Salima. The name came like a ripple underwater, delicate and distorted. She froze. Salima. Her name, again, not screamed, not whispered with menace, but uttered as if from beneath a stream. It echoed strangely, touching her ears and vanishing all at once. She glanced at the door. It was closed. Her father's snores had ceased, though she couldn't remember when. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning it had all returned to normal. The sky was bright, birds called from the trees, and smoke curled calmly from the village cooking huts. Salima washed her face twice to shake the night from her skin, but the feeling lingered, that someone had been in the room with her. Watching. She said nothing to anyone. But the whispers returned. Not just at night. They came in the still moments, when water boiled but hadn't yet bubbled, when wind passed through the leaves without touching the grass. Always soft, always breathy, always just her name, drawn out like a thread tugged from a wound. Salima. She pressed her palms over her ears. Hummed to herself. Chanted old lullabies Nima used to sing when they were little and afraid of the dark. The whispers only paused. Then came the footprints. It was Musa who noticed them first, days later, when he visited to bring herbs for her father's cough. They stood in the center of the kitchen, and Musa glanced down, brow furrowing. "You've been out early?" he asked. She followed his gaze. Bare footprints, faint but damp, marked the clay floor. Small. Not hers. Nima's feet had always been slightly smaller. She laughed nervously. "Probably water from the jar I spilled earlier." But Musa crouched. Touched one. The clay stuck faintly to his fingers. "This print's too fresh," he said. Salima crouched beside him, heart thudding in her ears. She touched one of the footprints. It was cool. Not cold like morning water. Cool like river skin. Like something just risen. She cleaned the floor later, scrubbing until her fingers ached. She did not ask where the footprints had come from. She did not say the word ghost. She did not pray. That night her dreams returned. She dreamed of the river again, black and endless. Nima stood waist-deep in the water, her soaked dress clinging to her like a second skin, hair hanging down her back like wet ropes. Her eyes weren't angry. Just open. Fixed. Salima couldn't speak in the dream. She tried to call out, but the air in her chest turned to water. She woke up coughing, choking, breathless. The next morning the house was colder. Her father lit a second fire, muttering that the wind was wrong, that the walls had been sweating. And Salima noticed the mirror above the door again. It was fogged. Even though no one had cooked, no water had been heated. She wiped it with her shawl. Her reflection blinked a beat late. She didn't look again. Later that afternoon, as she swept near the hearth, she found it. Folded neatly, pressed flat as if it had just been laundered, Nima's favorite dress. The one she had worn the day of the river blessing. The one Salima had watched vanish beneath the black current. It was lying on top of the firewood basket, soaked through, but not dripping. It was damp in a strange, unsettling way, like it had been submerged in time rather than water. Salima reached for it with trembling fingers. Her hands brushed the fabric, and the cold traveled through her skin like a needle of ice. She dropped it, stumbled back, staring at the dress. It was the exact shade of river blue. And it smelled faintly of lilies. Nima's favorite flower. She burned it that night. Built a small fire in the back of the house. Waited until the coals glowed deep and angry. She placed the dress in the center, fed it dry branches, whispered no prayers, spoke no apologies. The fire hissed as it devoured the fabric. She waited until nothing remained. Then returned to the house and locked every door. But in the morning the dress was back. Folded. On her pillow. Still wet. Still blue. This time she screamed. Her father rushed into the room, coughing from his sick lungs. "It's her," Salima cried. "She's here. Nima, she won't leave me alone." Her father looked at the dress. He didn't ask where it came from. He sat slowly on the edge of her bed, stared at it for a long time and finally said, "Did you bring her back?" Salima couldn't speak. "She was born with both sun and storm," he murmured. "I should have seen it when the birds went silent after she cried for the first time." "What are you talking about?" Salima whispered. "She was never meant to leave quietly," he said. He picked up the dress. His hands trembled, but not from age. He folded it again, more carefully this time, and placed it on the floor beside her bed. "She'll come again," he said, rising to leave. "And when she does, look her in the eyes." Salima wept into her knees that night. Not from guilt. Not from fear. But from the terrible rising certainty that something had gone wrong with the lie. It wasn't enough to wear Nima's walk, her voice, her smile. The river had kept a memory of the truth. The walls had remembered how her sister laughed. And now the house, the water, the very mirrors, they were all starting to tell the story that Salima had tried so hard to forget. In the silence between breaths, the whispers returned. This time they came from the walls themselves, like the house was breathing with her. "Salima. Salima. Are you warm, sister?" The dress on the floor shimmered faintly in the candlelight. Still wet. Still waiting. At first the dreams were faint. Musa would wake unsure if he had even slept. Images swam behind his eyelids, water, hair floating like river grass, the flash of pale skin beneath dark current. Sometimes he heard a voice calling out, soft and distant, but muffled like words spoken behind a veil. A name tried to rise from the depths of his memory, but it always slipped away the moment he opened his eyes. Then the dreams grew sharper. More detailed. More insistent. And the voice gained shape. It wasn't just any voice. It was hers. Nima's. Musa began to avoid sleep, sitting long into the night beside a flickering lantern, his fingers stained with herb oil, his eyes dry and stinging. He didn't tell anyone at first. Not even Salima, who now wore Nima's clothes and smiled with Nima's face. But the dreams kept returning. In one he stood at the river's edge, watching a girl in white walk into the current. The sky was stormless, the water still. Yet she turned her head as she stepped deeper and deeper, and her eyes locked on his. They were Nima's eyes, but filled with something he had never seen in them before. Accusation. Musa awoke gasping. His arms ached. He looked down and froze. Dark bruises bloomed on his wrists. Thin. Finger-shaped. He rushed to wash them in cold water, hoping to explain them away. Perhaps he'd slept wrong, or gripped something too tightly in a dream. But the marks lingered through the day, faint but undeniable. He thought of the river then. And for the first time in months, the silence of it frightened him. When he finally told Salima, he spoke with trembling breath. They sat beneath the awning outside her father's home, dusk brushing the village with violet shadow. "I dreamed of her," he said. Salima turned slowly. "Who?" He didn't answer at first. Just looked at her, searching for something behind her eyes, something beyond the features she now claimed. "The water," he said instead. She walked into it. But not like she was drowning. Like she was returning. She looked back at me. Salima's lips parted. And she said my name, he added. That made her flinch. He noticed. He pressed further. Her voice. It wasn't confused. It wasn't lost. She knew what she was saying. She knew me. Salima's fingers twitched where they rested in her lap. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she did something Musa would remember for the rest of his life. She cried. But not in grief. Not in sorrow. One single tear rolled from the corner of her left eye, then stopped. And reversed. It crawled up her cheek back into her eye. Musa jerked back in shock. What was that?" he whispered. Salima wiped her cheek quickly, face pale. "Just dust," she said. But her voice trembled. And for the first time, Musa saw something break behind her expression. A crack in the smooth mask she wore daily. It wasn't the first crack. He'd begun to feel the difference in small things. The way she hesitated when passing places Nima used to visit. How she avoided the river altogether. How animals tensed when she approached. Birds went still, goats pulled away, the healer's cat had vanished entirely. And now this, the reversed tear. The bruises on his wrists. The voice in his dreams. "Tell me," he whispered, leaning forward. "Did she slip? Or did she fall?" Salima looked at him sharply. He held her gaze. "Did you see it happen?" She stood. "I don't want to talk about it," she said too fast. He rose too. "Because you were the only one there, Salima. And sometimes I wonder why you're different now." "I had to become different," she snapped. "Grief does that." But he didn't believe it anymore. He couldn't. That night the dreams deepened. In the next dream, Nima stood in the center of his hut, soaked and barefoot. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with rage but with knowing. Her mouth opened, and the river poured out of it. Not water but black current, swallowing the floor, dragging him down. He couldn't move. He woke screaming. The bruises returned, now darker, not just at the wrists but climbing toward his forearms like someone had tried to drag him from his bed. He went to the healer. The old woman placed her hand on his chest, then looked at his arms. Her brow furrowed. "These are not from a dream," she murmured. "Then from what?" he asked. She didn't answer. But that night she left a bowl of salt and river pebbles at his door. The dreams changed again. Now he saw the wedding. Salima in a white veil. But when he lifted it, it was Nima beneath it, bruised, weeping, silent. When he reached for her hand, it turned to water. He woke drenched in sweat and something whispered from beneath the floor. The villagers began to whisper too. Musa was pale. Musa had grown quiet. Musa muttered in his sleep. Musa had gone to the river alone twice this week. "Is he mourning still?" someone asked. "He sees her in his dreams," another said. But no one said the name. Not aloud. And Musa began to question his own mind. Until one night, unable to bear the silence, he walked to Salima's home again. This time he didn't knock. He waited outside listening. He heard her talking inside. But not like normal. Whispering. Responding. He crept to the window and peered through the crack. Salima knelt in the center of the room. Before her, folded neatly, was the same blue dress Nima had worn the day she disappeared. It was damp. Still damp. "I did what I had to," Salima whispered. There was no reply. But her body flinched like something answered. "I didn't know you'd stay." She touched the fabric. The fire in the hearth flickered high without wind. Musa backed away slowly, heart hammering. He returned home in silence, unsure of what he'd seen, or if he had seen it at all. The next dream was the worst. He saw the cliff. He saw Salima, not Nima, leading the way. He saw the hands. He heard the scream. And he felt the river welcome her. He woke before the splash. This time he didn't scream. He just wept. And when the sun rose, the bruises had vanished. But something else had appeared, a lily blooming in the corner of his hut. What? Fresh, dripping river water on the floor. He didn't touch it. He just sat beside it, staring, and waited for the next dream. Asked ChatGPT. The mirror had always been small. A round, bronze-rimmed glass hung near the wash basin, with hairline cracks along the edges and age marks that speckled the surface like dried water. Salima had grown used to avoiding it. She didn't need to be reminded of her borrowed face, how well it fit, how well it fooled. But that night she couldn't help herself. A cold wind had pushed through the cracks in the wall, snuffing out her candle too early. The fire in the hearth refused to hold flame, despite dry kindling. The house, always warm in the evenings, felt suddenly hollow and cold, not just in air but in silence. Even her father had locked himself in his room early, coughing a little, but mostly quiet. Salima paced the room, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The shadows clung longer than they should have. The corners of the house felt deeper, wider. Something was off. Then she caught it, a flicker in the mirror. She turned toward it slowly. It wasn't her. Not her reflection. Not quite. The girl staring back looked like her, yes. Same cheekbones. Same jaw. But the expression was wrong. Her eyes weren't wide and uncertain like Salima's had become. They were sharp. So, watching. Salima stepped closer, breath held. The reflection didn't move. Her own body trembled. Then the girl in the mirror blinked. Only the mirror version blinked. Salima gasped and stumbled back. The reflection stepped forward. Except Salima hadn't moved. She stood frozen, feet rooted to the floor, unable to look away. Her chest rose and fell in panicked rhythm, while the girl inside the glass, Nima, stood still, dry and silent as stone. The wet sheen in her hair shimmered like it had just emerged from the riverbed. Salima reached out with a shaking hand, palm facing the mirror. Her reflection didn't copy. Nima tilted her head. Salima turned and ran. She grabbed the pestle from the kitchen shelf, a heavy wooden thing her father used to grind roots. She stormed back to the mirror, lifted the weapon high and slammed it down. Crack. The mirror fractured. But it didn't shatter. Instead, a thin red line seeped from the crack. Not rust. Not dust. Blood. It bled. Salima dropped the pestle. Her heart skipped. The blood crawled across the mirror like a living vein, threading through the cracks, trailing toward the edges. The bronze rim darkened. She backed away. The house groaned. It wasn't the wood settling. It wasn't wind. It was breath. Inhale. Exhale. A long, low sigh. Then, I was taken, came the voice. Soft, wet, and unmistakable. Nima. Salima turned in all directions, eyes wild. Where are you? She whispered. The fire behind her sparked violently, then died. The room plunged into darkness. Only the mirror glowed faintly. From it came the voice again. I was taken, Nima whispered. A second passed. Now I take. The window panes rattled. Water pooled at the door. The smell of lilies, crushed, drowned, decaying, filled the air. Salima tried to scream, but her throat locked. Her knees hit the floor. Her hands shook. I didn't mean to, she whispered. The mirror hissed. The blood stopped. A drop fell. Not on the floor, but on Salima's forehead. She looked up in horror. Nima was closer now. Her face pressing to the inside of the glass. Her lips not moving, but her voice still speaking. You wore my life. Salima sobbed. You walked into my sun. Please? You took my voice. Salima pressed her hands to her ears. I didn't know it would, I didn't mean. But the mirror kept speaking. I want it back. The mirror pulsed once. Then silence. The fire relit by itself. The room grew warm again. But the mirror still bled. A single, crimson drop slowly traced its way down the cracked glass. And behind it, Nima waited, unmoving, unblinking, watching. The dry season was supposed to mean cracked ground, brittle stalks, and air heavy with stillness. But the river didn't care for rules anymore. It began with a soft hum underfoot, the kind that made pots rattle slightly on their shelves. Then came the morning that the fisherman's daughter didn't come home. She had gone to the riverbank to fetch water just as she always did. Her empty calabash was found floating upstream. Upstream. That was what frightened the elders most. Rivers don't run backward. Except now they did. The village gathered in uneasy silence, eyes watching the bend in the path that led to the water. The elders lit old incense and murmured warnings of a spirit unsettled. They said no name, offered no blame. But Salima felt the eyes that lingered too long on her. She hadn't been the same since Nima's death. Or since Nima's return, in mirrors, in whispers, in dreams. And now the river too was remembering. Salima awoke one morning with her bedsheets soaked. Not from sweat, from water. Cold and smelling faintly of lilies. Her body felt dry, untouched. But her hair was wet, strands clinging to her cheeks like vines. She lit candles. She bathed in herbs. She recited every cleansing chant she could remember. But when she tried to pour water on her skin, it recoiled. She watched it bead up and roll off her arms, refusing to soak in. It was as though her very flesh rejected the blessing. Or the water rejected her. She asked the priest to bless her with river ash. When he sprinkled it, it sizzled softly against her shoulders, and left a black stain that no amount of scrubbing could remove. At night her dreams turned to flood. She stood on rooftops, watched lilies rise like islands in the current, heard children calling her name, not in love but in warning. Sometimes in her half-waking state she heard knocks. Not on her door. From the walls. From beneath the floor. From the very soil outside her window. Tap, tap, tap. She lit more candles. The mirror stayed covered now. She had wrapped it tightly in cloth and tucked it behind the storage chest. Still she could feel it breathing. One afternoon, desperate, Salima walked to the center of the village square and stood beneath the prayer tree. The sun beat down. Dust clung to her feet. She raised her arms and cried out, "I am not cursed." People turned. "I am not haunted." Silence. She saw her betrothed, Musa, watching from a distance. His eyes were sunken, his face unreadable. He didn't step forward. She saw her father among the elders, avoiding her gaze. The priest came with a bowl of sacred water. He reached to pour it over her head. The water refused to fall. It hung in the air for a moment, then hissed and turned to steam. The bowl cracked in his hands. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Salima ran. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the river, chest heaving. The water was too high, nearly kissing the top of the bank. It wasn't just risen, it shimmered like it was breathing, like it was watching her. She dropped to her knees. "What do you want?" she whispered. The surface rippled gently. Behind her, reeds rustled with no wind. She heard her sister's voice, or thought she did. Not angry. Not screaming. Just a question, "Why did you push me?" Salima covered her ears. Tears burned her eyes but didn't fall. She hadn't cried in weeks. Not properly. Not since the mirror. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the water. It pulled back. The river recoiled from her touch as though disgusted. She tried again. The same. Again. Again. The current hissed, and a single lily floated toward her, pristine and white. She didn't touch it. She couldn't. It drifted past. When she returned home, the floor was wet again. Her footprints made no sound. Her breath fogged the windows, though the heat outside was unbearable. She tried to sleep, but the knocking returned. This time it was from the roof. She curled into herself, fists clenched. The river is calling. That's what the old women said when storms came out of season. The river knocks when it wants something returned. And now it had come for her. But what could she give that it hadn't already taken? Except, maybe, herself. The Festival of Winds was a sacred day in the village. Bright cloth hung between baobab trees. Drums beat steadily as women twirled in skirts made of reed and thread. Children darted between fire pits, and the air was sweet with roasted yam, honeyed corn, and fermented fruit. Salima stood at the edge of it all, eyes darting, hands cold. She had not wanted to attend. Her sleep had been broken. The knocking on her walls had become voices, the voice had become her sister's breath, and now her days felt like dreams. But her father had insisted. "Show them your face," he said. "Let them know you belong." She had painted her mouth red and wrapped herself in Nima's favorite shawl. The air shifted just as the drummers began the ancestor rhythm, a beat that called for memory for those who walked before. And then she saw her. Through the dancers, stepping lightly on the dust-packed earth, came Nima, soaked to the bone. Hair slicked like river reeds. Skin pale like moonlight through fog. Her eyes, those same dark, steady eyes, were not smiling, but her lips curved softly as though they remembered how. People turned. Then laughed. "Salima, you nearly fooled me," said Aunt Nia, clapping. "You look like a ghost." Others chuckled and shook their heads. "She loves her games," someone whispered. Salima tried to move, to speak, but her throat locked. Her feet stayed rooted. That was her sister. Not her in costume. Not a trick of memory. That was Nima. And no one knew. Nima walked like herself, but slower. Heavier. Each footfall was measured. She didn't blink as often as she used to. Her movements rippled, like water disturbed by something beneath. She passed Salima close enough to brush her shoulder. The air turned icy. Nima did not turn. She walked directly into the circle of dancers. The drummers faltered for a beat, then continued, their rhythm slipping briefly. Musa, Nima's old betrothed, stepped forward to greet her. His brow furrowed, but he smiled. "Salima," he said, laughing softly. "You feel different." Nima reached for his hand. "But right," he added. They began to dance. Salima's chest tightened. Each step Nima took mirrored the dance they used to practice by the river in secret when no one watched them. The heel turn. The side sway. The way she tilted her head when Musa leaned in. It was perfect. Too perfect. Nima's feet left no dust. Salima stepped forward. Someone touched her arm. It was the priest. His gaze was heavy. Your sister had grace, he whispered. But this feels like wind hiding rain. Salima looked at him, panicked. You see her too? He didn't answer. Only nodded slowly. As Nima and Musa danced, the crowd clapped, shouted, spun. But beneath it all, Salima heard it, the river. Not nearby. Not in reality. But inside her ears. A slow, pulsing wash. A rhythm older than the drums. Nima's shawl dripped. Her footprints glistened briefly before vanishing. A child ran up to her with a flower wreath and tried to place it on her head. The moment the wreath touched Nima's wet hair, it withered and fell. The child froze. Nima crouched low and placed a hand on the girl's cheek. The child smiled, then walked backward into the crowd, dazed. Salima found her voice. No, she called. Heads turned. Musa looked up. His hand slipped from Nima's. Salima, he said, confused. Nima turned too, slowly. Her head swiveled like water drawn toward a drain. Their eyes locked. For a heartbeat, the village disappeared. All sound dimmed. Nima's lips didn't move, but Salima heard her voice, clear and wet in her mind. You walked away. I walked back. Salima shook her head. I didn't mean. You took the breath meant for me. The wind stopped. The cloth banners stilled. The fire pits flickered low. The drums halted. Everyone turned toward the center. Toward the two sisters. Nima took a step forward. Salima did too. Musa stood between them, unsure. You're both? He started but stopped. He looked at Nima. Then at Salima. His brow furrowed. Nima tilted her head. Who are you? He whispered, not to Salima, but to the girl he just danced with. Nima smiled. But it wasn't warm. I am the one who drowned. The villagers gasped. A child cried. The wind picked up again, fast and sharp. Dust spiraled. Nima turned toward the drums, picked one up and tapped it once. A deep, guttural sound. From the distance, the river responded, a rumble, a crash like a tide climbing uphill. Salima ran. Not away but toward her. She stopped inches from her sister. Her eyes burned with unshed truth. I'm sorry. Nima stared. I was afraid, Salima whispered. Nima reached out, finger touching her sister's lips. Salima's skin steamed where they met. The village stared, stunned, unsure of what they were witnessing. Then Nima stepped back, lifting the drum, and began to beat it. Each strike echoed like thunder. The crowd broke apart, running in every direction. But Musa stayed rooted. As did Salima. Only Nima moved, dancing now not like herself but like the river. Slow. Inevitable. Unstoppable. By morning, the festival grounds would be torn, the river would flood its bank for the first time in years, and 3 villagers would be missing. And the only trace of Nima would be a single shawl, still dripping, tied to the ancestor tree. Salima sat by the hearth, wrapped in a shawl that no longer warmed her. The fire burned, but she felt no heat. Outside, children played in the wet dust and drums pulsed in the distance. Inside, everything was still, except her. She opened her mouth to speak. No words came. She tried again, slower this time, shaping her tongue carefully around the syllables she had known all her life. Ether. But the sound that escaped her lips was not hers. It was Nima's voice. Soft, measured, musical. As if calling from beneath water. Salima's breath caught. She pressed her hand to her throat, as if to pull her own voice out from where it had hidden. But it was gone. Every attempt to speak was overtaken by Nima's tone, her rhythm, her cadence. Salima tried to say her own name and it came out wrong. I am Nima. She gasped. No. I am Nima, she repeated, trembling, unable to stop herself. Her tears burned hot, but her body felt colder by the second. Her fingertips were always the first to chill, now they were numb. Her legs ached. Her arms moved slowly as though submerged in heavy water. She could still breathe, still move, but her body no longer felt like hers. It was being worn from the inside out. And Nima was doing the wearing. She tried to run, to scream, to knock pots off shelves and make her father notice, but her footsteps made no sound. Her fists struck the walls like feathers. Her breath no longer fogged the window when she leaned close. And then she noticed something else. The floor no longer echoed her steps. Her shadow no longer followed. She ran to the doorway and stood in the bright afternoon light. It fell across the floor, casting clear shadows of trees, leaves, the thatch of the roof, and her jug beside her. But not her. Salima had no shadow. She backed away from the light, heart thudding wildly in her chest. She wasn't invisible. People still saw her. But the sun no longer claimed her. It was as if the world no longer believed she was there. That evening, the villagers came to her home, bearing sweet bread and woven garlands. They sang songs to Nima. But they gave them to her. To Salima. They touched her cheeks with henna, braided her hair, and said how beautiful she looked. The river took something, but it returned something better, someone whispered. She wanted to scream, I am not Nima. But her lips moved and the words came out. Thank you. I feel whole. Her own ears recoiled. Inside her, something screamed. Nima was taking root in her body, and no one could see it. Not even her father. Not even Musa, who came that night to bring her carved beads. These were meant for her, he said softly. But now they feel right on you. He touched her wrist. She flinched. He did not notice. He leaned in, brushing her cheek with his lips. I don't know what happened, he whispered. But I know you're the one I'm meant to love. Salima wanted to run. But her body stayed. That night, she dreamt of the river again. Except this time she stood on its surface. Beneath the water, her real body floated, eyes wide, mouth open, reaching upward. She tried to jump in, but her feet were stuck. Roots wrapped around her ankles, roots shaped like Nima's fingers. When she woke, her hands were folded perfectly on her lap. Her shawl was pressed, smooth. Her hair braided in a way she never did herself. She hadn't moved at all. But someone had arranged her. Each day after that, Salima faded further. Her reflection blurred. Her skin turned pale, faintly blue at the fingertips. Her voice remained Nima's. Her laughter echoed wrong as if spoken by two mouths. Her father began calling her daughter, in a slow, uncertain way. And Nima? Nima lived on through her. In the way people looked at her and smiled now. In the way they said, you're so calm now. So lovely. We misunderstood you. In the way Musa held her hand longer. In the way her house smelled of lilies again. Salima realized something terrifying. Nima didn't want vengeance. She wanted memory. She wanted her life. And she was taking it. Salima sat at the mirror again, the one she had once shattered and wrapped in cloth. Now it was whole, smooth, silver bright. She leaned in. This time she saw Nima. Not as a reflection, but sitting opposite her, face to face. Identical in every way, but somehow, more present. More solid. Salima reached out to touch the glass. Nima reached too. Their fingers met. The mirror rippled. Salima opened her mouth. Who am I? She whispered. Nima smiled. And whispered back, you're what I left behind. The mirror darkened. The fire went out. And in the silence, the wind carried a new name. Not Salima. Not Nima. Just a sound, low humming river deep. The house grew colder. And the girl who once betrayed her sister sat still, wrapped in silence, fading, her voice no longer hers, her story now worn by someone else. Hey, say a bride lives near the river now. She keeps to herself in the old clay house beyond the baobab grove, the one with no windows on the west side. She walks barefoot through the reeds at dawn and washes linen in silence at dusk. Her door never stays open longer than a breath. The wind bends away from her roof. Children dare each other to run past her garden. They whisper behind cupped hands that she never blinks. That she speaks in a voice not hers. That she's beautiful, but in the way deep water is beautiful just before it pulls you under. Some say it's Nima who survived. That the river gave her back, changed but chosen. Others say it's Salima. That she went mad after her sister's death and now believes herself to be two people. But no one knows for certain. She answers only to bride. The villagers stop trying to ask which. Inside her house, every mirror is covered. Black cloths hang over glass, over bowls of still water, over polished metal. Not even the kettle reflects. She does not explain why. But when a visitor once lifted the cloth from the hall mirror, he screamed before his reflection ever looked back. He said he saw two girls behind him, one weeping, one smiling. The mirror cracked that night, top to bottom, and the cloth has never been lifted again. At market, the bride never speaks more than needed. She buys bread, oil, and black dye for her shawls. The baker swears she pays with coins still damp, even on the hottest days. The butcher says her shadow is never where it should be. And the healer's son, Musa, he no longer speaks at all. He lives downriver now, carving bone flutes no one hears him play. They say he once loved a girl with a laugh like rain, but now only carves in silence. When asked which sister he had truly loved, he only says, they both wore her face. No one sees her laugh anymore. Or cry. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is low and the frogs have quieted, someone walking past the bride's house may catch a glimpse through the thin cracks in the clay. Just a flicker. Just a shape. A woman standing still. And beside her, another. For only a heartbeat. Two shadows moving gently on the wall. One brushes her hair. The other watches. One moves like river current. The other stands as still as stone. Then they vanish. No one dares speak of it aloud anymore, not truly. But if you ask the oldest villagers, they will look toward the water and cross themselves against the wind. They will tell you. One sister was taken. One sister took something back. And now neither walks alone.